Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. There are many tools that energy healers and naturopaths use in their practices. But what about the power of the old-fashioned pendulum? Joining me again this week on Vox Novus, my dear friend Kak Young says we can use pendulums to heal ourselves and our planet. Kak Young has 3 doctorates, a PhD in natural health, an ND in naturopathy, and a DCH in clinical hypnosis. She's a licensed religious science minister and a producer and director with more than 30 years of experience in the television industry. Her website is kakyoung.com, and she joins me this week to share her latest book, Random Acts of Healing, using pendulum power to heal ourselves and our planet. Please join me in welcoming back to Vox Novus my dear friend, Kak Young. Welcome back, Kak.
Thank you, Victor. It's so joyous to be back with you again. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Kak, the last time you were on was the 5th time. And as they do on Saturday Night Live, you were a member of the 5-Timer Club, the first inductee of the 5-Timer Club. And I'm thrilled to say that you are now the first inductee of the 6-Timer Club. So very, very much welcome.
Oh my gosh, do I get a sash or,
Absolutely.
like badge or something? Yeah, oh boy.
You get private access to the lounge where only the people who have been on multiple times have the ability to sit and relax with one another. So you're a celebrity, my dear.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
Kak, I'm so grateful for your prolific authorship. How many books is it now?
I'm up to 30 and I'm working on my 31st.
Oh my goodness. And also your sharing of your wisdom, your generosity of spirit and sharing your wisdom, and especially our friendship. Your life and interests are multifaceted and have spanned the entertainment world to natural healing and metaphysical concepts. For our listeners meeting you for the first time, and there can't be that many, please tell us about your amazing path.
Well, when I was working as a stage manager on the Cher show for CBS, the head stage manager, I was the second stage manager, and usually I was an associate director, but I was brought in to be a stage manager because Cher had requested a female stage manager that would come to her dressing room and get her and bring her out and interface so that if she were in a not proper stage of dress, it would be a female and not a male. So I was hired and I said, oh, I'd love to do the series. Well, from that point, I was learning the craft on stage as opposed to in the booth. And the head stage manager was very kind to me. And one morning he dropped dead. And he was 55. So I said to myself, oh my gosh, not only do I have the entire responsibility of running this show, and our guests were Chris Christopherson, Ike and Tina Turner, and Elton John.
Oh,
so I had to run the entire floor and be in 22 places at once, get them all out of their dressing rooms, up to rehearsal, So it was pretty amazing. And when I got home that night, I just literally crashed into my bed, grateful that I hadn't made some terrible mistake in my job. And I also said to myself, my God, if he was 55 and he dropped dead, do you want to be in this industry just until your mid-50s, or would you like to live a little longer than that? So I began exploring natural health. I began exploring ways to take care of myself. And apparently that was a good choice because my master teachers put me and set me up with amazing shamans and teachers and masters in all these different areas. Because when you work in television, you have an intense time that you work. Like on a series, you might work 3 months, 3 straight months, or 6 straight weeks in the studio. And then you'll have some time off between the next gig that you get. So during those times, I would go study something with somebody, and that included hypnotherapy, that included crystals therapy, that included various different types of healing, including Huna. And I went all over the world in my little journeys to study with these people, and I found some pretty incredible human beings that were willing to pass on their knowledge. So I say that this is my time in life where I want to pass on what I have learned, because I was given the real McCoy, if you will, and from them I want to pass down the authentic teachings, or as much as I can. And that's why I write my books, because I want them to be available for other generations. And I don't want people to get certifications in some kind of a healing application that they get overnight or they get over the weekend, and all of a sudden they call themselves an expert. That is not the correct way to pass on these teachings. You learn them deeply, and then you share them.
Absolutely. Today we'll be discussing your new book, Random Acts of Healing, Using Pendulum Power to Heal Ourselves and Our Planet. But first, please share with our listeners about some of your previous books, what inspired them, and what you offered readers, including the last time you were on, The Rainbow Witch.
Yes, yes. Well, I like to look at subjects that I have learned from the inside out, and then I like to examine them and bring depth to them, and bring authenticity. So I have written books about, for example, the 1 Minute Cat Manager, how to manage your cat and bring joy to both of you using positive techniques and even Bach therapy remedies. I have a book on Bach flowers because I like to help my cats heal themselves from a vibrational and frequency point of view. I have a book on supreme healing, and it talks about the different methodologies of healing, and that healing really starts in the mind, and you decide how you're going to heal yourself, and then you bring in those elements. I've written books on crystals and essential oils, of which I am expert in both fields. And I've written books on fairies, because I have lived with fairies. Being Irish, I've lived with fairies and lore all my life. I've written a book on feng shui. I became a feng shui practitioner in the 90s, and I found that learning how other civilizations and cultures balance their lives and look for richness in their lives and improvement. The more you can learn about other cultures, the more you could bring into your own life. So I like to share those principles. And I've been told that my writing is in simple language, and it's easy to understand. It's like a manual for understanding something else. That's the way I like to teach, and that's the way I like to learn. Just the basics, and then you expand from that. So I think my books are clear, and they're concise, and they are to the point. And I am so thrilled and happy to share what I know with the rest of the world.
And of course, your authorship also runs on the feline side of our soul family with the autobiography of my nephew, Spirit the cat. Would Spirit like to share a word or two right now?
Well, he wouldn't. He's downstairs. He's asleep. This is his nap time, and he's made it very clear to me. He got a scratching couch a couple of years ago, and he's proceeded to eat the entire corrugated cardboard down from the back. And he guards it. He sleeps in that because he doesn't want anybody else to use it. I think perhaps he's embarrassed that he's eaten his couch, but I'm not sure. So that's where he is right now. And I'm not the one that's going to disturb him, Victor.
Absolutely. But please send him my regards when we're done with this interview, please.
I will. I will definitely do that.
What inspired your brand new book, Random Acts of Healing, Using Pendulum Power to Heal Ourselves and Our Planet?
Because I learned dowsing in divination years and years ago. I learned it from my father when he was building our house. He used to use a plumb line with a stainless steel or a lead washer at the end, and he would hold this long cord up, and then the plumb line would go down in gravity, and that's where he would snap his line for a plumbing pipe or something that he was installing in order to keep it straight. And so one day, they were building the house at night. They bought the land and they had the concrete laid, and then they had the exterior walls put up. And then my mother and father plumbed it and wired it on their own every night after work. So they would take me, and I was like 5 and 6 years old, and they would bundle me up. And this was in the Northwest, so it was cold. And my father would stir this big leaden pot full of lead, because that's how they sealed plumbing in those days. And so somewhere between him using that pendulum for a plumb line and stirring the hot molten lead, I kind of got a sense of that richness that people work with. And so one day he cut off his line and handed it to me and said, "Here, you can figure out your future." I think I was probably underfoot, and he wanted to just entertain me. Well, I began playing with this pendulum. Now I'm 5 and 6, right? So I have not read about it. I don't know anything about it. I'm just playing with it. And I would, because I was an only child, I made it my friend. And so I took it with me everywhere, and I would begin to talk to it, and I would ask it questions. And I learned by myself, yes and no, and maybe, and how the pendulum works. So then when I went to Girl Scout camp, they asked us to make something. And the first thing I made was a pendulum out of some beads. So it was, it's always been part of my life. And then when I began studying it and began learning about dowsing and the history of it, I really wanted to write the book, especially since the U.S. Navy hired someone in the 1960s. His name was Vern Cameron, to find all the submarines in the world, if he could, kind of on a dare. And when he not only located the U.S. submarines, but he also located the Russian submarines, they said to him, "Mr. Cameron, do you have a passport?" And he said, "I sure do." And he said, they said, "Well, could we have a look at it, please?" And he said, "Sure." So he produced his passport, and they took it and they locked it away. And they said, "Sir, you are a national treasure. We don't want you to travel anywhere. We don't want you to go anywhere. We're going to make sure that you live in a protected area, because you have secrets that the world will want to know. And therefore, we want to keep you to ourselves." Now, this poor guy thought maybe he'd get a nice check or a gold watch, but no, they took his passport, and then they watched over him for the rest of his life, because they knew that he had the power of vision to be able to locate all the wartime submarines. Now, this was in the 60s. This was Cold War, but still, it's a pretty powerful thing. Now, for a while, the Navy made sure, or, the Security Department in the United States made sure that his name and that story wasn't out. You can find it now. And his name was Vern Cameron, and you can check on it. He was also a dowser, besides being a user of pendulums. So
it sounds like he was also a remote viewer.
Yes, he was. He had abilities, let's just say. And so then when I really went into the history and found out that in the first century, an astronomy guy, one who was a scientist and a romantic poet, he worked for the Emperor An, and his name was Zhang Heng. And he invented one of the first pendulums, basically for an altruistic reason. The Emperor An wanted to know when there was going to be an earthquake. So Zhang invented a seismometer that has a pendulum in the center of it, so that it could detect 300 miles away if there was an earthquake. And the reason the emperor wanted to know that is because he wanted to be able to send supplies to his faithful, to his followers, if they needed it. And then Zhang Heng continued to use the things that he had invented in order to identify 2,500 different stars and 130 constellations. Now, he did this. Remember, this is in the first century. They didn't even have eyeglasses back then. So this guy was using his equipment that was based on frequency and impulse to determine things that we still use today and are still consider accurate.
Wow. Amazing. What about the Middle Ages? How were pendulums used in the Middle Ages?
Well, Galileo and his son Vincenzo were in Pisa one day, and Galileo saw this lamp kind of swinging back and forth in Pisa. Apparently, there'd been a little earthquake or a little bit of earth motion. So he said to Vincenzo, write this down. I think that movement back and forth, that could be something. We could put that to use somehow. And so Vincenzo wrote it down and he drew it up. It was 100 years later that a Dutch scientist, Christiaan Huygens, invented a clock. This was in 1656. That would keep accurate time by using the pendulum. And I think we're all familiar with seeing in our grandparents' house that those old grandfather's clocks with the pendulums that swing and keep accurate time. And you can set them and you can readjust them, but it's basically the swing that matters. So that's really how we got the pendulum clock passed down to us from Galileo, who never really made one. And then there was in Foucault, his name was Jean-Bernard Léon Foucault. He hung a pendulum 220 feet down at the Parthenon in Paris. He wanted to demonstrate the rotation of the earth. So we put a bunch of sand down there, and at the tip of the pendulum, there was a pointed tip, and that would make a pattern in the sand as the earth would rotate, because the pendulum would then document it. And I think we've all seen one of those at the Smithsonian. We've seen them in local places. I know there's one in Los Angeles at the Griffith Park Observatory, and there's one close to me right here at Thomas Aquinas College. But they're all over the world, and people decided that would be the fashionable thing to do, is to hang a pendulum and watch the rotation of the earth in the sand.
And of course, they all said it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
Well, I think they sang that, Victor. I think they sang that. Yeah.
Absolutely. When I think of pendulums, I think of dowsing. And probably the first thing I ever saw with a pendulum was someone actually dowsing in a field. What is dowsing, and how does that work?
Well, dowsing is looking for something. It is usually associated with a farmer who wants water for his crops or her crops. And so they might take a forked stick, or they might take two dowsing rods. And when they keep walking forward and the rods cross, that's the place where there would be water. Dowsing itself is a technique for searching for water, minerals, or anything invisible. And it's by using something that will point towards it. The fork stick will dip and point down towards where the water is, or the wires will cross in the middle, and some will also point down, depending on what type you're using. And they are responding to unseen influences.
And the people who were doing that used to be called water witches.
Yes, and the process is called doodlebugging.
Doodlebugging. I haven't heard that one before.
Yes.
Tell us more.
Doodlebugging, it's the same thing as, witching for water. It's the same thing. Doodlebugging is the same thing. So, yeah, doodlebug. So I guess you could go out doodlebugging with friends, and people might question your sanity. But there you go.
What are some of the properties of pendulums, and how do they work?
They measure things. They find things and they measure things. There was a French scientist who was able to, and this was in 1750, he went to the Andes and he was able to determine the depth of the crust of the earth by using his pendulum on 3 different steps, STEPPE, of the Andes. and he was able to measure the crust of the earth. Now, I don't know how he did that. I wasn't there. I don't know his process, but it was mathematics and it was number of swings, and he was accurate. When we got tools later that were able to measure sonar depth, it turned out that he was absolutely correct in his measurements. Now, how he did it, I don't know. I'm not into the math of it, but I think you trust the pendulum to connect with your inner truth teller, with your inner wisdom. You connect that pendulum, and the micro vibrational properties in your fingers holding the pendulum will give you the answer in yes or no expressions. So you cannot ask the pendulum to explain the law of gravity to you. The pendulum's not going to do that, but you could ask the pendulum, is there a law of gravity? Yes or no, okay? You can continue to ask it like a prosecutor does in a trial, starting with yes or no answers. You do not want to lead your pendulum any more than you want to lead your witness, but you want to keep asking the questions to get to the bottom of what you want. And that's what my book is all about, because you have to learn how to hold the pendulum, where to hold the pendulum, how to stabilize the pendulum with your elbow, and then how to begin to get a routine of getting it to respond to you, yes or no. Now, two things are possible. One is that it will respond in its own way, yes or no, and it might give you an up and down yes and no. It might give you a side to side yes and no. You have to just ask it until you get the answer. Or you can train it so that you are completely in sync with your inner wisdom, and you can train that pendulum. And that's, some people like to do that. I just ask it when I want to sit down with it. The first thing I do is ask permission. I ask if it is willing and ready to work with me. And then I bring in all my masters and spirit teachers. And if I'm going to do a healing, I'll bring in a healing spirit medic to help us figure out or to heal a situation, which is why I want to heal the planet using pendulums. But if I'm asking questions, and then I will start just the yes or no movement, and then I'll begin to ask the questions deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until I find what I want. Then at the end, I will thank the pendulum for its help, and I will thank all the spirits and people who showed up to help, because we are not alone. There are masters and guides and teachers and spirits around us all the time. And the only reason that we don't get their help is that we don't ask for it. So I'm always asking for my angels and my spirits and guides and masters and teachers. I'm asking for them to come in and help me with this dilemma, with this issue, with this something I want to know. And they're more than willing to show up, but you have to ask. And then, of course, politely, you thank them as well, because they've given you their time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll go more deeply into some of these aspects in the next segment. My guest is Kak Young. Her brand new book, Random Acts of Healing, Using Pendulum Power to Heal Ourselves and Our Planet. Kak, please share with our listeners where they can find out more about you and also get your books.
Okay, my books are available on Amazon. You just type in either my name and find my books, and then find Random Acts of Healing. Or you could go to my website, which is kakyoung.com, and that's spelled K-A-C, Kitchen Apple Charlie, kakyoung.com.
And we'll be back with more of Kak after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest, my dear friend Kak Young, her brand new book, Random Acts of Healing, Using Pendulum Power to Heal Ourselves and Our Planet. Kak, in the last segment, you began going into some of the ways that you use the pendulums. Do you have specific pendulums that you enjoy working with?
Oh, that's such a wonderful question. Yes, I do. I have purchased pendulums in different parts of the world. I have one that was an amethyst pendulum that has turned amethysty and clear quartz crystal. It has changed over the 20 years that I've owned it, but I bought it at Tara in Dublin and just outside of Dublin at Newgrange in Ireland. And then I have pendulums from Hawaii. I have pendulums from England, Stonehenge. And one particular pendulum was very, very active when I was at Stonehenge because there's the Preseli bluestone is extremely highly active frequency and vibrationally. So the pendulums just jump out of your hands like little jumping beans. So I have one from there, and I have about 5 or 6 pendulums that I use for my work. I have ones that I use personally. I have ones that I use for healing, and then I have ones that I use to talk beyond the veil.
For someone who is going out to a store to purchase their first pendulum, how can they tell if a pendulum is resonating with them or right for them?
Do they like it? Is it pretty? Is it attractive to them? Are they drawn to it? And then if so, what's it feel like in their hand? You should really test the weight. I was doing a class yesterday in pendulum work, and one lady was using a pendulum that was too heavy for her. It wasn't swinging. So I asked her to switch out to a pendulum that was a little lighter. Oh my God. And it was night and day. She just really was getting a lot of answers. So if you are, so the way of the pendulum may be good on one day and it may not be on another. So you have to determine that just by simply how it feels and how it is reacting. Pendulums are made up of living things. These are living, breathing atoms that are in the gemstones of them. You can use glass if you want to. You can use metal if you want to. One of my mentors, Raymond Grace, uses a bullet. He carries a 38 strapped to the back of his jeans, and he lives in Appalachia, and he has a bullet and with a chain on it, and that's his pendulum. And he does a lot of powerful, powerful, powerful work. So I assume that there's no gunpowder in his pendulum, but I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't ask that question. That's his business. But Raymond Grace also has a lot of videos on YouTube that are amazing. And he was one of my teachers. So if anybody can look him up and have a good time.
And how would someone select specifically dowsing rods?
Well, again, ones that feel good. I have 3 sizes of them. I have one, they're all copper. I don't know why I choose all copper, but there are stainless steel ones as well. But I have one is a small set that I can just carry with me if I want to. And then one is a longer set. And a little story I have, I was involved in the Thomas Fire here in Ventura in 2017 when my entire neighborhood burned to the ground. Fortunately, I only had all of my orchards and gardens, and just 25% of the house was damaged with fire. But when the roofer guy was putting the roof on the rebuilt garage, he noticed that there was a utility worker out in the street with dowsing rods. And he jumped down and went out and talked to him. He said, "What are you doing, man?" The guy said, "Well, I'm actually looking for water lines." And so he said, "Well, don't you have a map of that? Doesn't the city know where they are?" He said, "Yeah, well, but we don't know where the broken one's on, and we don't know where the water may be leaking or may be going, into the gas lines. We have to find that. So I'm using dowsing rods." Well, my little roofer was down there. He was so excited. He was like, "Really? Could I try him?" wow, this is interesting. I've never seen anything like this. So he tried his dowsing rods and good Lord, he found some water. So he was so excited. Now he was changed. He was now metaphysical. And the worker, the utility worker says he uses it all the time. He finds that that's just about as accurate as any other piece of equipment he can find. But he needed to know where the water was and was not before they dug up the street.
I remember in my early teens growing up in Brooklyn, New York, making my own dowsing rods. They used to have these cardboard handles that were used to tie up packages, like carrying packages of clothing from the laundry. And they were about 4 inches long and perhaps a half inch in diameter. And they had a hole through the center where the rope would go through. And then I would take wire hangers from the closet and I would open up, flatten them up, cut them to length, and then bend the ends, and then put them into those handles and use those as dowsing rods. And I loved using those.
And what did you find, Victor?
I found coins. I found pieces of information that I was looking for. I found things in the house that my mother couldn't find. So it was really enjoyable using those. And it gave me an inkling into working with energy back in those days.
Well, sure. And that's what, if we all just knew and realized that we're surrounded by vibrations and frequencies, and that we can tap into and tune into and utilize those and really communicate with. It's not about stealing energy and harnessing it and putting it somewhere. It's about working in tandem with it, very, very much like how the Native Americans used to work with the land out here. They didn't just plunder it. They thanked it, they appreciated it, and then they replenished it. So some lessons we are very slow to learn, but using a pendulum, we can clean up our water sources. We can take that energy that's in the water, for example, a stagnant pond, and we can, with our pendulum, create an energy field that will transmute the water from sorted to usable and healthy. And I've watched Raymond Grace do it. I've done it myself. I do it on a frequent basis here for the water coming into my house because I want it clear and clean and beautiful. So there's lots we can do. And I really wrote the book for people to use it for their personal power, to get used to it, to discipline themselves, to teach themselves and their pendulum how to work with each other, and then to reach beyond, will my boyfriend ask me out over the weekend, into really powerful healing of ourselves and our planet. When we get beyond ourselves and we reach beyond that and we harness and utilize those powers and those energies out there, and we give the energy to them to transmute it. We give the direction to make the changes. We can do it. We can all do it. And that's why I want, if I could give the book away free, I would. I want people to concentrate on this and to learn this and to really develop it within themselves. I mean, pendulums are part of me because I was given the opportunity to get to know one and to experiment with it when I was 5 and 6. But now I put it to use because that is my legacy, being able to change and help the physical nature of the planet as well as the spiritual realms that surround it.
Thinking about your experiences and my experiences, if someone is looking to pursue their psychic abilities, this is one of the ways of doing it, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. And that's it's how you get to know that you do have abilities and that you do have the talent to funnel in all of the energies and make them specific to what your wants and needs are. You can create the life you want by using a pendulum, because what are you doing? You're talking to your inner self. You're communicating with your subconscious, and you are training it to think and act the way you want it to think and act, so that it's not a wild creature just going hither and yon and going with the flow. I mean, the flow is nice to go with, but you got to choose the flow. Just don't go with any old flow. You'll end up you know, in some dump somewhere. Choose the right flow. You have the right and the birthright and the ability and the intelligence to choose the right flow and then go with it. Don't swim upstream. Don't swim against the current. Go with the flow, but choose your flow.
So we started talking about this in the first segment, and let's get it back for our listeners who are learning about this for the first time. So someone goes out and they find a pendulum that really resonates with them, that attracts them. What are some of the steps they have to use in preparing to use that pendulum?
Well, it depends on what the pendulum is made out of. I like to cleanse it. So if it's stone or even if it's metal, you want to cleanse it and get any vibrations off it that it might come with. So you can put it in the sun. If it's a crystal or a gem that can take the sunlight for half an hour to an hour, you can put it in a saltwater bath. You can smudge it with some holy sacred sage, and you can just run it under water and hold it in your hands if you want to. I have a technique where I consecrate pure water under the full moon, and I use that water in jars that I keep for my sacred services. So I would put the pendulums in a little bowl in some of this water, and I would bless it, and I would say I would like all the energies that you've come with to now transmute and become mine. I want to personalize you for my work, if that's all right. And I bless you, and I give you permission to be fully and completely who you are. And then I'll dry them off, and then I may do a ceremony where I welcome them. And I would welcome them into my life, put them where my crystals are, and let them experience the flow that I have created for all of the objects of my sacred work. So they would be there for a little while, and then I would work with them, and I'd say, okay, it's your turn. Let's break you in. How's that? So I like to use a chime, or I like to use a bell. I like to use something that signals what we're doing. So right here, I have a little bell, but I might use something, an angel bell, and I might bring in the angels. So now we have a sacred space around us, and we have sacred sound. And then I will say, all right, will you work with me? Do you wish to work with me? And I will hold the pendulum, and I will let it respond to me. Now, it may not move for a minute. It may move. It depends on how connected it wants to be with me, and vice versa. So pretty soon I'll say, show me yes, then. Show me yes. And it'll show me a direction. And then show me no. Show me no. Now, you don't want to always make your pendulum be solidly still. You want it to have some kind of a movement, because everything is always moving and changing. That doesn't mean it should be going around in big circles, but it should, it shouldn't be totally, completely still. So then when you say, show me yes and show me no, you will let the pendulum show you which direction that is. And then you will say, all right, I want to ask you a couple of questions. Is this Monday? Of course, you ask what day of the week it is. Is this Monday? Is this Tuesday? Is this Sunday? And then make sure that it's truthful, and make sure that the pendulum can answer it. The pendulum will answer. And then you might ask it another question like, is my dog's named Fido? And then it will answer and make sure that it's true, that you're asking true things. And then you ask it something like, do pigs fly? And then watch how it answers. So you want to acquaint it and become acquainted. It's like driving a stick shift. You want to get in, you want to feel how the levers work, you want to feel how those pedals work together, you want to become in sync with it. So test drive your pendulum and make sure that you and it operate mechanically correctly. And then you can begin to ask it questions. And when you ask it questions, again, remember how the prosecutor asks. They don't ask complicated questions. They want yes or no answers, because that's the way that they can develop their case. So you are the prosecutor here, not in a mean way, but just in the technique, in the questioning way that you want to do. So instead of saying, should I get that new Buick down the street, the one with the white walls and the pretty side mirrors? Should I get that? Now that's way too much information for the pendulum. So you might want to start with saying, pendulum, is it time for me to get a new car?
Yeah.
And then the pendulum will say yes or no. All right. And then you say to the pendulum, should I buy a used car? Would it be okay if I bought a used car? Yes or no? And it will tell you that. Okay. And then you can double check and say, should I buy a new car? Yes or no? Okay. So then you can eventually get to the Buick down the street. But you don't want to start out with all of that. You want to work your way down, it's like grilling your teenager. You don't want to start out with the hard questions. You want to ask, Johnny, I didn't find you in your room on Saturday night. Were you out? Johnny, were you with your friends? Johnny, were you at the library? No. Johnny, so you see what I mean? You kind of get into that questioning there, so you get the answers that you want, and and you never blame your pendulum. You never curse at your pendulum. You always are polite with your pendulum, and you thank your pendulum for working with you. And sometimes you'll find that the pendulum is reluctant to answer. So now you get the opportunity to ask questions like, should I be asking questions about this subject matter? And your pendulum might say no. And you might ask it, is there more that I need to know about this subject matter before I ask questions? Yes or no. So you can begin to delve into why you're getting a resistance. And you might, like if you're out on the land, for example, and you're dowsing for water and it's not working, you might, instead of throwing the stick down and swearing at it, you might say, is this land legal for me to be dowsing? You're going to get a yes or no answer, and maybe it's no. And if it's no, you want to say, what do I need to know? Is there more that I need to know about this land? Are there permits that I need to get for this land? Do I need to speak with the owner? And you're going to get those answers from the pendulum, because the pendulum is your friend and it's trying to protect you. And sometimes if you're working with another person and you're asking questions for them, the pendulum's going to tell you it's none of your business by way of reacting negatively, by not giving you an answer. Okay, is this a subject matter I should not be questioning? Yes or no? Is there some reason behind this line of questioning? Yes or no? Will someone be hurt if I continue this line of questioning? Yes or no? Again, you're getting down like a funnel, down and down and down to the bottom line.
And when we come back, we're going to be talking about using pendulums for healing. My guest is Kat Young. Her brand new book, Random Acts of Healing, Using Pendulum Power to Heal Ourselves and Our Planet, will be back after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Are you prepared for an emergency or disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Don't find yourself saying,
I'll trust water bottles and a flashlight to save the day, but I'll be proved wrong.
With a tornado approaching, I'll realize that I lack a wheelchair-accessible shelter.
When the floodwaters rise, I'll be up in the attic with 20 cans of beans. It's a recipe for disaster.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Get started at ready.gov/older adults. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Kak Young. Her brand new book, Random Acts of Healing, Using Pendulum Power to Heal Ourselves and Our Planet. Kak, between segments, we were just sharing together about the importance of respecting the power of the pendulum and all metaphysical healing tools, because these are gifts to us and we have to respect them.
Well, exactly. And it's, when someone goes out and cuts down a tree, a lot of people get upset in the community. Did they ask permission? Was that the right thing to do? Who did it? And why did they do it? And darn it, why didn't they ask my permission? So that's what we're dealing with on the other side, on the invisible world too. Everything has a right to be where it is, exactly and perfectly in its own right. Now, we do not have the right, nor should we assume that we do, just because we own the land. For example, well, I have the deed to this property, so I can tear up and do whatever the heck I want. No, you can't, or you shouldn't. You certainly can, but it would be wise if you didn't. If you approached your land like an explorer, and you would go in and you would say, do I have the permission to remove these trees from this land? You might get an answer no. So then what you need to do is you need to change your plans, and you need to somehow build around those trees. I mean, they were there first, perhaps, and you want to work in concert with your land and with whatever it is you're doing. So if we're working with a pendulum and we're going to work with energies on the other side, we need permission to do that. We need permission from the other side, from the entities. We need to invite them in. And if they show up, they're giving us their permission. But, the old adage, it was actually a female Navy commander who said, sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Not in this case. I mean, that was kind of funny and cute back in the day, but that's not true anymore. We want to ask the permission and go into this work, this metaphysical work with, people are in agreement. That way, you're going to get reciprocity and you're going to get the truth back to you faster and clearer.
Absolutely. How may pendulums be used in personal healing?
Okay. In my book, I have a chart where if you want to know what's going on with you, like you're having some problems or some issues, start out with the chart that says mind, body, spirit. Put your pendulum in the center. Now, this is after you have attuned yourself to your pendulum and it to you. And when you are working with it and and trust each other, put your pendulum in the center of the mind, body, spirit, and let the pendulum tell you. You would ask the question, can you tell me, pendulum, which area of my body is causing me these issues? And then you let the pendulum go into one of the areas. So let's say it goes into spirit. Now you go to the spirit chart that I've created, and there are choices within that. So then you say, okay, great, it's in my spirit. Can you tell me what in this area of my spirit is not in harmony that is causing this problem? And then you let the pendulum work and tell you the areas. It might be one, it might be two, it might not be. Then further down the line, you can keep going. Remember the funnel, we keep going deeper and deeper. So there are charts beyond that will tell you more specific things that you can learn about yourself. And then you can get into a chart about the vitamins. What kind of vitamins does my body require? And then you can go and let the pendulum sort out, what is my body lacking in my vitamins? And it will tell you which vitamins you are lacking. Now you might say, well, now how does it know that? Because your body knows everything. Your subconscious, your inner spirit knows everything. You carry with you a genetic and a DNA pattern physically, and you also carry one spiritually. So you are handed down emotions and spiritual information and lessons and lore, just like you are in your DNA. Let it work for you. Put it to work for you to figure out what's causing you irritation or health problems.
Let's say that someone has struggled with relationships. May the pendulum help that person find balance and create a healthy relationship?
Absolutely. There are two things. I have a lot of charts in my book that you can use to get down to what your relationship problem might be. You can also go through the chakras and you can see what chakra is weak and what is not week and where you need to bring balance. And I have a lot of information there about what it looks like if your root chakra is out of balance, or what it looks like if it's overactive or underactive, all the way through all 7 chakras. I also have a chart about archetypes. What is your personality? What does your archetype look like if it's overactive, if it's underactive? What do you need to shore those things up? So all of that stuff is become clear to you. And if you want to create your own charts, now I created my charts under a commons license with a site called subtil.net, and that's SUBTIL. It's a French site. So you're going to see charts in both English and French, and you can see a lot of my charts. You can look up my charts if you want to, and you can print them out and use them. You can create and design your own chart for whatever it is you want to create. But I would suggest you read my book, you learn my book, you understand what's in my book, and then you branch out into creating your own. But these are all fabulous charts made by people around the world. So talk about a unifying community. It's really strong and very wonderful.
What about cleansing traumas from this life and previous lives?
So this is where Raymond Grace's work comes in. And this is an advanced technique, and I don't recommend anybody doing it today. This you want to grow into. And I was saying before, whatever it is you want to transmute, you can take a past life that is maybe creeping into your current life, and you can reduce the negative influences that it has on your life and transmute everything that is bothering you. You can do the same thing with abuse. And we go in through a meditative state initially. This is very serious work. And you make the pendulum turn. You have to invite in all your masters and your guides, and you want to have in the medic. You want the past life medic or the abuse medic come in, spirit medic. And then you will use the pendulum, you will make it spin, you will start to spin it from its very tippy-toppy end in a counterclockwise way. And as you do that, you will say things like, I hereby transmute and transform and cancel all the negative vibrations from the past life. For any event or action that has harmed me in the future, I now transmute it into positive energy. And now when you've said that, you stop swinging the pendulum and you let it stop on its own. It comes to a resting point. And you can continue the words as it does that, where you say, all of the past is now transmuted into the positive. It can no longer harm me. It can no longer affect my life. All of those energies, those deeds, all of those emotions are hereby transmuted into positive energy. And you wait for the pendulum to stop, and it will on its own begin to move in a clockwise direction. And so it's at that point that you say, the energies in me are now full of freedom, full of peace, full of happiness, full of love and life. I no longer remember anything from the past. Those energies are transmuted and gone. Replaced in me is now the action of peace, love, kindness, compassion, and I show that to myself and to others every day. And you continue to let that pendulum swing until it stops. Now, it may take a while, and that's why I say this is advanced, because you have to not be impatient. You have to know that you are healing right here. You are doing the work of a bodhisattva. So in this time and in this frame, you let it work. And then when it stops, you take that pendulum in your hand, you put it to your heart. You are grateful, 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 and you thank the spirit medic, the abuse medic that came, that helped you transmute all of this. And then you simply release all of that energy. I like to go into a prayer or to a chant. I like to recite the 5 precepts of Reiki, and something that closes that ceremony after I have thanked everyone, every spirit, every entity for their help. And so that's the ultimate of what we want to do. We want to change the lives and the damage that has been done in the past. We want to transmute it and move it forward into good, happy, wholesome, loving kindness.
The wisdom of Kak Young, her brand new book, Random Acts of Healing Using Pendulum Power to Heal Ourselves and Our Planet. Kak, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your amazing work.
Well, thank you, Victor, very much for allowing me this opportunity to talk to the world and to talk to your audience about the power that a pendulum has and what we can do with it. I can be reached at kakyoung.com. That's KAC, Kitchen Apple Charlie, young.com. And my book is on Amazon. It's published through KDP, Amazon. And you can also look it up by my name or by the book, name of the book, Random Acts of Healing.
Kak, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this wonderful information and wisdom at a time that our world and our people really need this work and this wisdom.
Thank you, Victor. And people say, oh, what can I do? I can't do anything. I'm just one person. Aha. No, you're not. You've got a pendulum and you've got the power. So use it.
Absolutely. Kak, I love you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Victor.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.